Let's talk just a little bit about assertions, contexts, and evidence. You have a PowerPoint about this, a very detailed one, in the folder, and I'm not going to go through all of the material that's in that PowerPoint. I want you to read it, and it is meant to be read, and you will, of course, be responsible for all of that information, especially once we work through peer review and as you begin getting feedback from me on your Project 5. But just to orient you a little bit, the PowerPoint will begin with a slide that says, in academic writing, generally, you will find three things: assertions, contexts, and evidence. Essentially, what that means is the entire body of your paper needs to be almost nothing but these three things. And if you've got anything that doesn't fall into one of those categories, I want you to think very carefully about why it's there. What we do with this sort of classification is we think about why we've included what we've included, what purpose we're trying to serve. Now, all of you have a common purpose. You're writing an argument, and that means you're trying to persuade the reader to come over to your side and to agree with the argument that you're making, okay? And as you do that, the argument you're making, the main claim of your paper, and any important subclaims, claims that they also will need to accept in order to accept your main claim, fall into the category of assertions. Assertions are the thing you want to prove. Now, that isn't just your thesis or your purpose statement. That also means the topic sentence of every body paragraph. Let me stop for just a second. Notice that I've said the body of your paper a few times. We've talked a bit about the difference in the intro and the conclusion in the body of your paper. Remember, right now, we're not talking about any of the more subjective or emotional or personal parts of the paper that might fall into those categories, although those also could potentially fall into one of these three categories. Here, I'm just talking about the argument structure. So remember, in the body of your paper, each paragraph should fully express one idea. And that means at the beginning of the paragraph, you probably want a topic sentence. You've heard it called before. But you want some kind of statement about the idea that that paragraph serves and expresses. And then the rest of the paragraph will provide context or evidence. Usually that idea that you're expressing is going to be an assertion, the thing that you want the reader to understand or to accept. Let's skip ahead. Evidence means everything that you need to include in order to prove that assertion. Okay, so remember, think back to some of the law analogies that we've used in some of our materials for this class. If you're a lawyer and you're making a case for your argument, you're not going to be able to just state something without calling in experts and witnesses in order to make that case for you. Okay? Evidence is everything that you call in, all of the things you've read, in order to bear witness to the fact that the assertion you've just put forward is true and right, and that the reader needs to accept it. So remember, you can't have an assertion without evidence, or it's not going to be valid or credible. And the evidence that you use needs to be reliable, it needs to be credible, it needs to belong to some kind of expert, and it needs to be tied directly to one of those assertions. Otherwise, it's just going to be information that the reader doesn't know what to do with. So as you're pulling apart all of your writing in Project 4, remember, every paragraph needs to have some kind of idea, and it needs to have information that's tied to that idea. If you've got more than one idea in the paragraph, you probably need two paragraphs. Okay. Context, on the other hand, we've talked a lot about context. You may have whole portions of your paper. For example, when you're pulling in some of the material that you brought about in Project 2. That may just be there to give the reader context so they can understand the assertions that you'll later make. You do need to be crediting your sources in that context section as well, using MLA documentation, but the sources that you use in context portions of your paper aren't there necessarily just to provide evidence to prove your assertions. They're there to show that you understand the history of that issue, and these are also the things that the reader needs to understand about the history in order to understand the assertions that you're going to put forward and the evidence that you'll use to prove them. So, ideally, once we move into the body of your paper, we shouldn't find any information that doesn't fall into one of these three categories and very clearly line up. As you're going through and revising your paper, remember, organization is for clarity. Organization serves your purpose. If you have any questions about what to do with a certain kind of information, or with some information that you're not sure exactly how to fit into your project, peer review is a great time to throw that out to the rest of your group members. Maybe they can help you with that. If you're reading somebody else's paper and they have something in there that just doesn't clearly fit into one of those 3 categories, then give some feedback about that. Say, I'm not really sure what this is doing here. Maybe you can make some guesses, but it isn't clear. Make that clear for them. And I will be doing the same thing as I read your paper as well. But the more you can fully understand this framework and try to work with it, the stronger your argument will be, the less work you're going to have to do with revising for your final portfolio. Now, the PowerPoint will lead you through several different kinds of evidence and how they can be used in different contexts and different arguments. Please be sure that you're familiar with that material. If you do have any questions as you work through it and as you work through your peer review and as you start revising your project, please let me know. And I will look forward to seeing the work that you do.